Good evening from the News Radio 1120 and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I'm Bill London. I do the wake-up call, 6 a.m. to 9, Monday through Fridays, except when I'm on vacation, on KPNW, streaming live at kpnw.com. And tonight's news brought to you by Dr. Michael Bratland of Chris Dental. He's a good dude. And he did a great job on my crown. All right, here's a look at the stories we're following. Well, in Oregon, like everywhere else that happens to be under the thumb of Democratic rule, the question is, okay, how are those states going to deal with it? Well, we know a little bit more about how Oregon Governor Tina Kotek plans to deal with it. The first thing that she announced on Monday was that she has back-ordered 3 years' worth of mifepristone, the abortion drug, because she says, we don't know what's going to happen. And then she also talked about illegal immigration. And she said that she's committed to all Oregonians, regardless of their immigration status. The question is, I guess here, what is the definition of Oregonian? I mean, if you're in the country illegally, are you an Oregonian? Anyway, the governor claims that she represents all of Oregon and, quote, she is standing up for Oregonians. Again, what exactly is the definition of that? Anyway, Kotek says there's a lot of unknowns about what will happen when President-elect Donald Trump takes office. She says, quote, I know we can come together and protect what we love in our state no matter what happens at the national level. So what do we love? Well, based on what she was talking about, I guess in Oregon, we love illegals and abortions. Anyway, now, of course, Trump has confirmed that he may use the military to carry out mass deportations. And Kotek says it's unclear what that might look like, but she promised to continue offering supports for illegal immigrants in Oregon. She says, what is strategic to make sure our immigrants in Oregon are protected? She says they are essential to our state, and I have always been a strong champion for protecting them. Oregon House and Senate Republicans declined comment, saying they'll hold comments on potential Trump policies until, well, they've actually been formally proposed. So something interesting is going along or happening along the West Coast. And we now know that it's going to get pretty convoluted and pretty nasty, and it has to do with EVs. So Representative Shelley Bossart Davis, a Republican here in Oregon and part of the legislature, sent a letter to Oregon's Environmental Quality Commission asking for a delay in the implementation of the advanced clean truck rules that are going to lead to a ban of heavy-duty diesel vehicles in Oregon. Yes, Representative Bossart Davis's office said that includes RVs, pickup trucks like Ford F-250 and Ford F-350s, utility vehicles, tow trucks, and semi-trucks. Now, back in November, 3 years ago, the Oregon Environmental Quality Commission adopted Act, which follows in the footsteps, of California and the California Air Resource Board rules that limit the kind of vehicles that Oregonians can purchase. Yes, Oregon is now under the thumb of California because of this agreement. The first phase takes place January 1st of this year, of coming year. The rules require medium and heavy-duty vehicle manufacturers to sell zero-emission vehicles, in other words, all electric, as a percentage of new vehicle sales starting next year. RVs, pickups, and semi-trucks must increase their zero-emission new truck sales in Oregon year over year based on the truck's size. Now, the ban begins in 2025, just a month from now, requiring 7 to 11% of sales be ZEVs, or electric vehicles, totally electric, and increases in percentage to 100% in the next 11 years. Now, according to Bossart Davis, due partly to the lack of technological advancement, North Carolina, Connecticut, and Maine, who also were committed to doing this, have backed off the California standards. Colorado, Maryland, and Rhode Island are also delaying implementation. Federal law allows states that choose to adopt California's regulations to modify implementation dates, but the substance of the regulations have to be identical to California's. So all of a sudden, California now trumps, well, Oregon voters. Representative Shelley Bossart Davis said Oregon's climate policies need to get back in touch with reality. So here's something interesting to note. When we start talking about semi-trucks, all right, first off, they're ungodly expensive. But here's something that few people know. So let's say that 7% of these semi-truck sales in Oregon and Washington go through. The next question is, well, where exactly are they going to charge them? You see, they don't have charging stations for these semis in Washington or Oregon. They're not the same as the ones that say you charge your Tesla with or other electric vehicle. So in other words, you got to sell something that's ungodly expensive and you've got nowhere to charge it. And secondly, how are you going to force shippers to sell something that consumers don't want? So you offer these particular vehicles and people go, no, I don't want to buy one. Well, what happens then? Oregon school districts are going to be paying an extra $670 million more to the state's public employee pension program, PERS, over the next 2 years, essentially wiping out all increases to school funding that was proposed by Governor Tina Kotek. The increased tab, which is going to be more than 10% for some districts, follows lagging returns and investment of the public employees retirement system here in Oregon. Yeah, which already has about close to $20 billion in unfunded liabilities. The latest PERS increases are the consequence in an uptick of post-pandemic public sector hiring, public sector wages growing far faster than anticipated because of threatened strikes or out-and-out strikes, and a pre-2003 investment formula that made employers liable for massive contributions of several years of underperforming investments. And it's expected that this is going to greatly affect teaching and learning in schools as even more school dollars disappear into the PERS black hole. Now, when they say, that these are contributions and the like, they're actually taxpayer dollars. So PERS covers teachers. It covers law enforcement. It covers state workers, municipal workers, county workers, anybody that works for any kind of government entity gets to have PERS. And, of course, these entities, school districts, law enforcement agencies, they pay taxpayer dollars into these retirement accounts. Emil Nishik, executive director of the Oregon School Board Association, says next year's sharp jumps in PERS rates will take significant money away from the classrooms without making life any better for current educators, except to make sure that when they retire, they'll have a nice pension. The impacts are going to vary, but at least 22 districts that we know of at this point are going to be facing average increases of 10% or more, in part because investment returns have been far lower than expected, but mainly because side accounts, which were meant to buffer PERS increases, are expiring. For 72 districts that don't have one of those accounts, the average contribution rate for PERS is going to be about 27% of their payroll. because all of these PERS payments come out of payroll. So over a quarter of the money that should be going to payroll and teachers is essentially going to go into PERS. Overall, school districts and colleges are going to be paying $565 million more in the next 2 years compared to the 2023 through 25 biennium, while about 77,000 employees who also pay into PERS will pay $105 million more. The increased cost to districts, or taxpayers, will more than erase the $515 million boost proposed by Governor Kotek for the school funding for next year and the year after. And she announced in July that she'd asked the state legislature early next year to send more than $500 million to the state school fund for the next biennium to boost student outcomes. No, really, it's going to boost pension outcomes. Fund, by the way, is responsible for the bulk of district funding, and payroll makes up 85% of school budgets. So swastikas and anti-Semitic flyers prompted an investigation at the University of Oregon. The university received reports at the incidents at a couple of residence halls. University Vice President of Student Life, Angela Lauer-Chong, notified students of incidents of hate at one of the residence halls and said that flyers were also slid under the doors of several students at 3 residence halls. Now, in the aftermath of this announcement, the University of Oregon was also flunked just days after it happened at the U of O campus. And the advocacy group Stop Anti-Semitism released a new report issuing the U of O an F grade when it comes to addressing anti-Semitism on its campus. The report that found 60% of Jewish students that were surveyed experienced anti-Semitism. 80% of them said they don't feel safeguarded by the school. And it followed an incident, and I mentioned them earlier that I'm going to get into, where a Jewish resident assistant's photo was defaced with a swastika and a Hitler-style mustache. And a Jewish scroll was vandalized and yellow ribbons symbolizing solidarity with the hostages that were taken by Hamas terrorists in Israel while those yellow ribbons were torn down. The university hasn't responded to its failing grade. And finally, Oregon has its first case of bird flu in Oregon in a person. The CDC confirmed a case in a worker at a commercial poultry operation in Clackamas County. The person, they say, had mild illness and was able to recover. They don't believe there's any evidence of person-to-person transmission. But the CDC says it's closely monitoring workers to identify transmission to the disease. They say people who are at risk of getting bird flu are those with prolonged exposure to infected birds. Well, that's happy. All right, Rick, there you have it, a little bit of the weird from Oregon. Now roll out the reel, and thank you, Dr. Michael Bratland of Chris Dental, for bringing us the news.